Hey, this is Todd Graves, the king of the Super Bowl host committee parade. And this episode of The Seismic Shift is all about the Super Bowl and bringing our community together.
Welcome to the Seismic Shift podcast, where we explore the seismic shifts that are shaking up the way that we work and the way that we live. I'm your host, Michelle Johnston, and today's episode is everything about New Orleans and the Super Bowl. And we have a VIP special guest in the house, Sandra Lindquist, who's the CEO of the Chamber of Commerce here in New Orleans. And boy, does she have her hands full. Thank you so much, Sandra, for taking your time to hang out with us to talk about the Super Bowl in New Orleans, considering all that has happened since we've last seen each other.
Right. Well, thank you, Michelle. We appreciate the invite.
So let's just put it out there. Let's just talk. I mean, where were you on New Year's Day when you woke up to the news?
Well, unfortunately, I was in New York City, so I was not even here when it happened. So my phone was blowing up by the time that I did wake up. As I think most of us experienced that same thing. Unfortunately, I felt a little bit more helpless because I was so far away that I couldn't just jump in my car and come downtown as a lot of our colleagues did.
Right. So it's been a couple of days right now as we speak. Well, Joe Biden, our president, was here last night in St. Louis Cathedral. Gail Benson and some of the Saints executives are visiting victims right now. So it's still very much present, obviously. So what is your take on it? What is your message about what happened?
It's an absolute tragedy that really rocked all of our worlds. And with any tragedy, just coming from New York City and looking at the World Trade Center monuments, we as people in general, whether we're here in New Orleans or in Japan or in Europe, we are all resilient as humans, and we need to take care of ourselves and help those around us that have been hurt the most and move forward. And moving forward for us as a community is, taking care of our people, as we said, but also taking care of the businesses that are still here in existence and, being closed down for the hours that we were and how that impacted the business community in the French Quarter or even just anywhere, talking about the tragedy in the French Quarter. But even we had the building that fell on Magazine Street and it impacted a restaurant that is right across the street, and they had to close down for the night. And the revenue that they lost, right there in the Christmas or holiday season, that's what we need to focus on now is how do we take care of our businesses and our people?
You are absolutely right. And if there's one thing we know about New Orleans is we fight, we're resilient, and we come back. And this will not keep us down at all. I'm so grateful that the Sugar Bowl committee decided to go ahead and reschedule it one day later. I had a house full of University of Georgia students in town at the game. And I, as you can imagine, Sandra, I was thinking, oh gosh, do I send them to the Superdome? But then I got word from all the executives at the Saints, oh my gosh, yes, we have scoured it. It couldn't be safer. The city couldn't be safer. And the girls went and they were so glad that they went. They said that the stadium was electric, that they were grateful to have the opportunity to show up and show that the terrorists can't win, that evil can't win, that we are strong. You're not going to knock us down. And you can't go after, the beauty of what makes New Orleans so special. That's just not going to win.
Right. And for them to experience the renovations of the Superdome, I mean, we're celebrating our 50th anniversary for the Superdome, which, showing my age, I do remember when it opened as a little girl. But it's over $500 million of renovations that have been made to the Superdome, and for them to experience it because it looks so lovely. So I'm glad that they went. And yes, I agree with you. I'm glad that it was postponed only momentarily.
Absolutely.
Although I normally vote for UGA, but they kicked Texas's butt too many times this season. So I was having a hard time rooting for Georgia.
Totally get it. And so let's just talk. I mean, first of all, I want the listeners to know, how did Sandra Lindquist get to be the CEO of the chamber? That is a huge job, and you do it so well.
Oh,
I have loved watching you soar and watching you shine in this role, Sandra.
well, thank you.
It's been such a pleasure. You do it so well. How in the world did you get to be CEO? Can you tell us your story?
Yeah. So my background is actually economic development, and I started my career at Jedco in Jefferson Parish doing economic development, and absolutely loved it. And as a kid, or even most adults, when you say economic development, they're like, "What the heck does that mean?" But I was able to focus on recruitment of businesses to New Orleans, specifically Jefferson Parish, by working with the state of Louisiana, with Entergy and other organizations that were interested in recruiting bigger businesses to the area. And also under that same vein was the ability to work with our existing businesses to retain them. So from Jefferson Parish, then I worked in Tangipahoa Parish, then St. Tammany Parish, and fell into the chamber world in St. Tammany before coming here to New Orleans. And so I started with the New Orleans Chamber in 2011. It's kind of hard to believe that now. And my predecessor, Ben Johnson, he became CEO and I became vice president at the same time. And we really made a commitment to ourselves and to the community to grow the New Orleans Chamber. Because at the time, it was less than 200 businesses as chamber members. And now we're almost 1,400 members. So it was a huge growth period for us. And we really focused on listening to the businesses and finding out what they needed from us and then creating programs and services around that. And that, I believe, is the success of the chamber.
I mean, your annual event is so hot. I couldn't even get a ticket. I could not find a ticket to get to it this year.
Michelle, I would have given you one.
You would have.
Of course I would have.
I could have called you. Yeah, that I woke up, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't have a ticket to the annual. I'm going to the annual thing. And there were no tickets to be found. This was a hot event. And what a beautiful metric to go from 200 to over 1,400. And you talk about, Sandra, and that's why you're one of the most admired CEOs, is you do exactly what, as an executive coach, I tell all of my leaders to do as their new leaders. First, just listen. Go on a listening tour. And that's what you did. And you found out what the businesses wanted, what they needed, and then you delivered.
Exactly. And we've continued to do that over the decade plus that I've been here. They tell us that they want a platform to talk about who they are and what they sell and what they're marketing. So we created what we call the Power Hour, which is 60 people, 60 minutes. Everybody stands up and does their 60-second elevator pitch. So you have a target audience of 59 other people in the room, and it's like a quick hour so you can get back to work and do whatever else you need to do. So, it's things like that we've created, which is so much fun too, it's the idea behind it and then the implementation of it and then the watching whether or not it is successful or not, tweaking it if it is not. And then, constantly monitoring all of our programs and making sure that they're still creating revenue for the chamber, because at the bottom line, we are still a nonprofit. And to better serve our members, we need to be creating the revenue to do these things.
Correct. You're absolutely right. I love the Power Hour because, as you know, I'm kind of semi-obsessed, if not obsessed, with connection. And that is a beautiful example of connection. Bring the constituents together. Bring all your stakeholders. Bring all of your businesses. What do they want? They want to get to know each other. They want to be able to sell what they're doing, or at least let people know. And in these little 1 hour, it's like speed connecting.
Exactly. Yes. And that's what we do actually at the chamber. 90% of our businesses are small businesses, right. And what they want is the networking and the connections. So we do, actually in 2024, we did over 85 events and brought together over 7,000 people in those events.
That's unbelievable. Yeah. Are you tired? Are you exhausted?
That's why I went to New York for like the week. The whole office kind of calms down for 2 weeks between Christmas and New Year because of all the evenings and mornings and, putting on events, you know how it is. But even just our monthly Chamber After 5, the last one we had, which was in November in 2024, it was at Mardi Gras World, and we had 400 people in attendance.
Unbelievable. The numbers have never been like that. Sandra, the numbers have never been like that.
But it goes to show that that's what our constituency wants. They want an opportunity to come together.
Connection.
And of course,
Correct.
it's New Orleans. We've got the venues, we've got the food, we've got the drinks, we've got the people. So it just makes my job easy, to be honest with you.
And I think that's why we're built to host. That's our motto for the Super Bowl, built to host. And so that's a perfect transition to the next question. How in the world are we tied for hosting the Super Bowl the most number of times? How and why do we do it better than the rest?
And I love that we are tied. And when you look at the metrics for the other cities, and I know you know all this too, but for our listeners, New Orleans is ranked last in population, last in Fortune 500 companies, yet here we are tied with Miami and hosting the 11th Super Bowl. And I believe it all comes back to the characteristics of New Orleans, which are the things that have made us be built to host events and conventions. It's our culture, it's our art, it's our music, it's our food, it's the venues, but more importantly than that, it's the people. The people in Louisiana are like nowhere in the world, and I've lived all over the world. Both my parents are immigrants, so I'm able to experience different cultures, and New Orleans is just so unique in that regard. But also, I do think a big plus for New Orleans in hosting the Super Bowl and other events too is, and I've heard it referred to as the triangle or the upside down triangle. If you look at French Quarter on the top left, Convention Center on top right, and down in the middle is the Superdome. So it's that triangle of walkability for people coming to the city. It's, not only are they able to go within that triangle, but then there's the streetcars that take them to the outskirts, to our Magazine Street and St. Charles and Ferret and Oak and, all these wonderful parts of our community that are a big part of who we are.
You are so right. I talked to my daughter about it again, since I had so many of her friends in town for the Sugar Bowl, and we talked about how close they all live in these big cities, and they have to travel 30 minutes on the interstate to get to their arena for their NFL team if they have one, and we're just a couple miles away. I remember one of the Saints games this season. It was a glorious Sunday afternoon. They played at noon. And me and my friend, we just walked home. It was a 5-mile walk, and we just walked home, and it was glorious. Yeah, the proximity of the Superdome and how everything is so walkable, from the restaurants and the bars and the hotels. You're absolutely right. Okay, so that was actually a beautiful transition. Thank you. That was my next question. So we're built to host. Why New Orleans? And what is, I do agree with you that it is our people. I chose to live here because of the people. I chose to live here really because of the festival nature. I couldn't believe how many events and fun things they were to do every weekend. There's a festival for everything, right? And then we make the Super Bowl into a giant festival with our own parade, and the whole week we're going to have events. So even if you don't have a ticket to the game, I don't even think I'm going to the game, and Sandra and I are on the Super Bowl committee together, that the events every single day, the NFL experience, and Todd Graves is the king of the Super Bowl parade. It's going to be incredible. So we do know how to put on events really, really well, and how to go to the next level as far as making quite a splash. So why else do you think that we're tied? So the people, the walkability, the food, you're right, the culture, the hotels, the restaurants. You're right. People love to shop here.
I agree. It's such a unique place, and the ambiance and the culture, and even the architecture of the buildings, and the history that we have here. Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite things to do is the streetcar. Just and living in California, we call them trolleys, and every time I say a trolley here, my hand gets slapped. I'm like, it's a streetcar. But even just looking like last night for 12th night, it starts by my house on Carrollton at the streetcar barn, goes all the way down into the French Quarter. How lovely is that? And where else do you see things like that?
You are so right. For those of you who are tuning in who don't know, the start of Mardi Gras is actually called 12th Night, and it's on January the 6th. And our first little Mardi Gras event, it's called Funny 40 Fellows, and they dress up, the members of this organization, and they ride a streetcar from the beginning, from where Sandra lives, of the streetcar line on Carrollton, all the way around the river bend and all the way on St. Charles Avenue, and then down to the French Quarter. And I was coming home from, and this is and yesterday, January 6th, is the first day that people give themselves permission to buy a king cake. And now, did you see Hubig's Pies has a new king cake out? We had Hubig's Pies. So I was over at my girlfriend's house last night having dinner with her kids who are all in from college and just loved being around them. And we tried the Hubig's king cake, which was fabulous. And as I was driving home on St. Charles Avenue, y'all, it was 39 degrees here last night, which is really rare for New Orleans to get that cold. And there were all these people camped out along St. Charles Avenue waiting for the Funny 40 Fellows to come by because they're ringing in the start of Mardi Gras. So that is something that I'm sure you know Tim Williamson, who started Idea Village, and now he's over at the New Society. We've tried to deconstruct what we call ritual and rhythm in New Orleans, because I realize and you've lived in other cities, I've lived in other cities. I've yet to live in a city that has so many rituals embedded into their annual rhythm that people not only look forward to, but participate in. And so when we were brainstorming, the reason why we're having all these podcast episodes about the Super Bowl, I'm on the Super Bowl committee, and I was out to lunch with Mark Romig, Jay Cicero, Mark Earhart, Rob Hatley, and we were talking about what can we do kind of to bring this whole region together so that people don't think that it's just like New Orleans, or it's New Orleans calling all the shots, right? I want everybody to feel a part of it, and based on the last podcast panel, they do, and you're doing a great job, Sandra, of just not having what might have been in the past kind of a New Orleans centric attitude. You don't. And it really does start at the top. Mark Romick does not, right? And so you all have a very inclusive, welcoming spirit. So thank you. So when we were brainstorming over lunch of how we can make sure that everyone feels a part of it, we were having lunch right after the Taylor Swift weekend. Let me tell you, I think what New Orleans does, and this is according to my daughter, who had gone to a Taylor Swift concert in Atlanta 2 years ago when it began and then kind of ended in New Orleans. She said it was night and day. The concert was the same, but the experience was night and day. She said, because in Atlanta, you would have no idea that there was a Taylor Swift concert going on. You come to New Orleans, she said the second the airplane landed, they're playing Taylor Swift songs on the flight. The airport is playing Taylor Swift. The restaurants have Taylor Swift specials. The police officers are exchanging friendship bracelets. Cab drivers are blaring the music. The coffee shops are having their specials. Their antique stores having Instagram backdrops for picture taking and with lines down the block. It was an immersive experience. So what we're going to do for the Super Bowl is we're going to try to replicate that. We do that really well. The whole community comes together and says, hey, this is really great for all of us. Let's all be a part of it in some way. But it's not dictated from the top. Nobody at the top. Sandra Lindquist is not telling us, okay, everybody, you need to do this, this, and this. It's very decentralized. And I think we do it so well because of rituals in our rhythm, like Mardi Gras and Jazz Fest, right? We and all these different festivals, we somehow figure out how to do it, and we do it organically. So what sorts of things do you think, as the head of the Chamber of Commerce, we can do to kind of replicate that Taylor Swift vibe for the Super Bowl?
Well, I think you just hit it on the head. It's exactly it. We know how to put on a party. And when I say we, it's that collective we. It's not just New Orleans. It's the state of Louisiana. It's Jefferson Parish. It's St. Tammany Parish. It's the River Parish. It's St. Bernard, Blackburn. It's all of us that come together. It is a capital W-E, we. And this is just in our nature. And I haven't heard it put together as the way that you did, but that makes perfect sense, that this is part of our calendar. That's part of our annual ritual, like you said. So it's just like we go to bed, we wake up, and we do it again.
Yep, rinse and repeat. And when we're again, I just loved hearing, college students who were in for Taylor Swift. They're like, "Oh my gosh, we're on Maple Street." And there were businesses on Maple Street doing Taylor Swift specials. Like it was pervasive throughout the city. You couldn't escape it. And so my hope is that we're going to do that for the Super Bowl, is that you're going to feel it in every facet of the city.
And a big part of that is, and being on the Super Bowl committee, and there's a PR committee and a supplier committee for the Super Bowl as well. But with the PR committee, I had one business tell me that they were not in that triangle, so to speak, being downtown, and they wanted to make sure that they were included in marketing about New Orleans, because decades ago, it turns out there was some marketing piece to the tourists that were coming into town saying, here are the restaurants in this area. But, that's not the only area of New Orleans. And so making sure that never happens again is a big part of, me wanting to be on the PR committee. But I do think just innately we've been able to expand more than that. And I guess, if you think of Freret Street 20 years ago versus Freret Street now, or Oak Street, or, they've been built up so much more by these small businesses, whether it's retail or restaurant, but they're all like so different. It can be an Indian restaurant next door to a brewery, next door to getting, fish and chips, but everything's delicious, and it's neighborhood areas.
And not a whole lot of national franchises. It's so local. It is so local. My daughter interned last summer for the Scout Guide, and she actually switched in the Scout Guide. For those of you who don't know it, it's a national franchise. And Taylor Morgan, who runs it here in New Orleans, she promotes small businesses. Mm-hmm. And I didn't realize that Magazine Street was one of the longest stretches of small businesses in America that you can shop from one end to the other and barely come across a national chain. That it's all pretty much local. It's really quite amazing.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And
okay, so it's the longest in the nation?
Yeah. And so when my daughter interned for the Scout Guide last summer, she said, "Oh my gosh, I want to come back and I want to be a part of New Orleans, because now that I've been outside of the city, I realize not every city is full of their own independently owned small businesses." And you're right. And as the CEO of the Chamber of Commerce, but this city is mostly small businesses. And
Mm-hmm.
that's probably why our personality is the way that it is, right? And why we're all such a part of things, because they're the mom and pop shops and we're all in it together. We're all neighbors together. Yeah, when Tim and I were exploring this ritual and rhythm, of trying to figure out, okay, this built to host, we really are built to host, and Walkability is a part of it as far as the Super Bowl and the restaurants and the hotel, and just a really fun experience for people. It is also, you're right, we know how to throw really big events, and the whole city gets excited about it. So I think we're going to do, similar things like friendship bracelets for the Super Bowl, and we're going to have Instagrammable backdrops, and we're going to have Super Bowl specials, and we're going to, really encourage any small businesses to be a part of such an economic impact. And I'm hearing from Michael Heck that it's a $500 million economic impact, like minimum.
Yes. I think in 2013 when we hosted, it was maybe a 400 million, and now it's supposed to be like close to over 500 million.
Over a $500 million economic impact. So why wouldn't you, if you were a small business owner, or if you just worked in a hotel, why wouldn't you want to be a part of the spirit of the Super Bowl? Because it's so good for everybody in the entire region. And that's what, on the last podcast episode, the leaders of Lafayette and Baton Rouge and Monroe and Lake Charles, they're like, look, yes, it's in New Orleans. And they said none of the other cities in Louisiana could host the Super Bowl. New Orleans can host it. So we're so proud as a part of the state to be a part of it. And even though we're probably not going to get somebody coming in, but if they love Louisiana and they love the culture and the people and the food and the festivals, maybe they will come to Lafayette. Maybe they'll drive up for an LSU game, right? Maybe they'll go to the north to Monroe, because it's not just New Orleans. It's truly the people of the entire state that makes it really special.
So true. And we, there's a national chamber organization. It's called ACCE. And, they host a conference every year. And, we just found out that New Orleans will be hosting in 2026. And it's the first time in history that Louisiana is hosting this conference. So, and it's, again, my chamber colleagues from all over the state are excited, whether they're in Shreveport, in Bossier, or Lake Charles. They're going to feel the impact of it too. It's just such a coup for the state of Louisiana, for New Orleans to host this.
Oh my gosh, I love it. And I can't thank you enough, Sandra, because I do feel that it's because of your leadership that the other leaders in the cities of Louisiana don't feel like it's just New Orleans. They totally feel a part of it. It starts at the top. It starts with you. It starts with the Mark Romigs and the Jay Ciceros and the Rob Hatleys. It starts with the leadership at the top saying, we are all in this together. And the Gail Bedsons, right? And the Dennis Lausches, like, we are all in this together. And what a great way for our region to shine. And I think that's the only thing that I started thinking when I just couldn't believe that we woke up to a terrorist attack on New Orleans, because I love this place so much and I love what it represents, that it represents individuality. It represents a freedom to be you. It represents openness. It represents inclusion. And I don't want that ever to be swatted down, and it won't. And I want others. I think this is a great opportunity for us to show the rest of the world, right, that we will galvanize and we're going to keep doing what we do and doing what we do, because it's so important to be our own selves and to be full of joy and to share that with others.
I totally agree. Absolutely, 100%.
So why don't we end on that? You as another opportunity to share with our 150,000 listeners. Thank you so much for tuning in. And Sandra, just share, like, why should people, even if they don't have a ticket, why should they come to New Orleans to experience the Super Bowl?
Well, honestly, I mean, the game is going to be one thing, but the experience outside of the game is going to be a whole nother thing. And it's going back to what we said, the culture, the food, there's one thing eating food in the Superdome, but all the restaurants surrounding the Superdome, I'd be having reservations for breakfast, lunch, and dinner for days. So it's coming to experiencing the culture, hanging out with the people of New Orleans, walking the streets of New Orleans, taking the streetcar to City Park. It's the full experience. Going to the North Shore, like you said. There's many things in here for all of us to experience.
Yes,
together.
We're going to be throwing our own Super Bowl parade, which is going to be super cool and fun, with Todd Graves of Raising Cane's. We're also going to have a media center. We're going to have an NFL experience. The convention center is going to be just hopping. It's going to be really an exciting time for everyone to come and experience the Super Bowl. And thank you so much for all of our listeners tuning in. You can see why Sandra Lindquist is a badass CEO. And we are so lucky to have not only her intelligence and her kind of strategic vision, but also her warmth. You can see why leaders at the top who really prioritize listening to businesses, giving them what they need and want, creating connection, creating belonging. To me, that's the secret sauce. And you can see why she's so successful. So thank you so much, Sandra.
Thank you, Michelle.
Okay, take care, everybody. See you next time on the Seismic Shift podcast. Thank you for joining us on the Seismic Shift. And before you go, can I ask one favor of you? Do you mind sharing today's episode with a leader you know? The power of this conversation is found in your using it and sharing it to create real connection in your life. Lastly, I'd like to thank Loyola University New Orleans and the Terra Firma audio team for helping bring this content to life.